Welcome. This is an extract from a workshop facilitated by Diana Ayling and Hazel Owen with the Department of Business at Unitec New Zealand. The workshop was looking at facilitation, design, assessment and ICT enhanced learning and teaching.
Now the catch is, how do I run classes and facilitate the learning across the whole course that brings it all together? So we've kind of done the beginning and we've done the end point, and now we're going to look at how to maximise the middle bit, which is that classroom time, and also how to maximise those student learning hours. So when I put up to you last week on the board the model of where students plan and prepare, they participate and they perform, what are they going to be doing in that performance time? And we calculated that out to be about 88 hours last week. So we want value for money in terms of our 88 hours out of our students. So that's what we're going to look at today and focus on that, how we can get the most out of it. And to just kick off with, I'll just talk to you about three things to begin with, is that taking the work out of Think. Think looks at holistic active learning, and he says that it's made up of three things. So these are the three things you sort of have in the back of your mind when designing learning experiences for students. He says that it works best when students have some sort of experience. Now they can have it in class, or they can have it out of class, they can have it working in groups, it doesn't really matter. But there's some sort of rich learning experience that takes place. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have the rich learning experience. He says it also works really well where there's a place for students to gather information and ideas, so that they're going off and doing some of their own research and developing some of the principles and concepts that you teach in class, that they go and collect those and create their own resource. And the third thing that makes a really good active learning is there's some sort of process for reflective dialogue, so that students capture their thoughts about their learning, how they're operating as a group, and that can be done by things like learning journals, or it can be done as a blog, or some sort of shared way of capturing reflections as well, like a discussion forum. So those three things, Think says, should sort of guide us when we're thinking about how we design our classroom time and how we design our courses overall. And then he gives you some further ideas, which I hand out to you. And I thought you might think that these are quite a good idea, because he talks about learning activities being direct, indirect, and then he gives you some options for online. Okay, and he makes a distinction in experience between doing and observing. So sitting there and observing isn't so much fun as actually doing. So he makes that point. Okay, so I thought that might be useful to you just in terms of what we're doing today. Now, I just thought we'd have a look at the results of our survey. Okay, we just asked you a few questions just to do a little bit of self-diagnosis about where we're at in terms of course design. Yeah, that certainly helps. This little survey was just taken off some work that Hazel's been doing. We're looking at sort of a best practice approach to blended learning. So we're just trying to get an idea of just seeing where people are at. So courses are designed to include access to or communication with global people and global resources. And so we get the result, about 41% say, yep, we do this sometimes. We've got 25% always considering this. We've got a few people sort of falling off into not really bringing in those global resources. The opportunity to include global, local and global collaboration, we're falling away there. That's probably the area that we would like to improve and increase the most, and that's what we're going to be looking at doing today. The course has got resources for video and audio and a range of formats. Most people are usually doing this, but again we could perhaps bring everybody up to include a greater range of resources, particularly in your online courses. Opportunities for students to negotiate their own learning outcomes are not very high, and that's another thing that perhaps we could change. We can in fact have an area in which students determine what they're going to achieve out of the course, and sort of adding one or two learning outcomes that are negotiated by students, and that would be fine. and that could perhaps bring something that's really positive to the student learning experience. The course is designed for students to participate with their laptops and wireless access. We're not doing so well on that. Only one person's doing that always. We'll probably guess who that person is in the room.
But Diana, they don't all have their own laptops, so why would you design a course for something that they don't have?
It was kind of interesting. I was telling about Tom's survey.
There's my colleague Tom Cochran, you might have met him or heard of him. He did just sort of an off-the-cuff survey with some students he was working with. I think they were in the design school. And fascinating, you looked at the desks and there was, I think there was a couple of laptops. He videoed the whole thing. And then he asked the question, how many people have got laptops? And about 3/4 of the people put their hands up. And then he asked the question, who's bought their laptop? And about 5 people put their hands up. So 3 people had laptops in their bags, and only 2 people have actually got them out of their bags. And another study they did in the Department of Language Studies, when asked why they don't bring their laptops or why they don't actually take them out of their bags, well, the courses aren't designed for them to use their laptops in the class, so why bother?
Okay, so they do have them. They certainly have enough to work in groups or work in pairs with them. It's just that we don't design it in, so why would they bring them? So we can easily change that by making it something for the course.
What do we do?
I think we move to this way of working. Even if they've got one laptop between 4 and they can work collaboratively in a group to do something, it won't be long before you've got one laptop between 2, and it won't be long before you've probably got everyone in the room that's using one.
If you end up with a class of mature students on the DPD and can't afford a laptop and don't have a laptop and are feeling marginalised by being told you must bring a laptop.
It's
not must. We're going to have class activities that we participate. I think you always do it as a group design thing. I don't think you're doing it. We're not doing assessments with our laptop in the classroom. I don't think we're moving to that model. But we're moving to a situation where we would expect to use laptops in classrooms in a group way. Yeah.
I think another limitation to that is the tiered lecture theatres with those awful desks, and a number of our classes are in those, and a number of the classrooms are missing. And those are diabolical. I mean, students are balancing already with, just a textbook and their notes and everything. Yeah,
I agree with you. It makes it really, really difficult.
Yeah.
The other limitation, and what we've just been discussing, PowerPoints in the room.
Yeah.
That's the other limitation. But now you see students starting to bring leads, so that's kind of interesting.
We took this room as a case study where you told us to all bring our laptops.
Yeah.
And
we've got.
That's why I've got this big bag.
Yeah, I know.
No. It's just looking at how rooms are laid out for this sort of thing. They're not.
No.
What you tend to end up doing is bring huge long extension leads with like 4 plugins, which then all your health and safety goes out the window because everyone's tripping over the leads. But that's the only way of keeping everybody going for anything longer than a couple of hours.
Actually, my point was more that it was just us two
But I think we've got more than that in the room. But we just.
I've just delivered them and left them in bags sitting next to people.
But that's you supplying Unitec that. You're right.
Yeah.
We're actually looking into this as well, and there's being talked about at the moment that we could be a pilot study for a laptop student type scheme of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, if we had something like that, that'll be excellent.
Yeah.
I'll be all for it.
But also building teaching spaces and learning commons and those kinds of things as well. So it's all being talked about at the moment.
Yeah, but it's good to raise this, good to discuss it, good to get some agreement. I think there are lots of issues. We can see lots of issues in this that it has to be carefully planned in and thought about.
But the biggest issue is we didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
That would be the biggest issue.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting how it develops over time. But it's funny seeing those students all sitting in those lecture theatres with their laptop, and when you're behind them, you can see that they're on Facebook.
Yes.
Okay, so my course is designed for students to communicate with each other through instant messaging and discussion boards. Not so much that I would have thought, because you have got the facility, but it's again, you've got to see the reason. Why would I do this? What's the point of doing this? Why would I set my students up? So that's, again, it's a design issue. And my course is designed with some scaffolding for new technology. That's a real tricky one, and one which Hazel's going to talk a wee bit about today. But if you're going to use new technologies in any given situation, you have to provide the resources that students can get on board with it, find out more about it, some how-to videos, some help options, those sorts of things. To dump students in the deep end, just leave them there, it's kind of a little bit cold. Okay, I'm not going to go through all these results, only ones that I think sort of help us today. My course includes student-centred activities. Everybody is on board, and that's what we're all focused on. Has some way of recording student voices. Not so good on this. The blogs and the wikis, those options not being taken up, obviously not being seen as useful, but if you look at, the reflected dialogue is useful. My course encourages students to form their own communities of learning. Yep, great informally, but how could we set that up a little bit more formally? Or maybe the students are actually just going off and doing that themselves in their own way, but do we know what's going on? So even some questions to our students about how you're going to work as a group, or can I give you some ideas on how you might like to work as a group? I know the names, backgrounds and learning preferences of my students. Yeah, that one's probably sometimes, but we probably don't do that as well as we could, and there's some options for handling that as well. And my course includes opportunities for informal and formal communication. Yep, that's doing really well. And in my course, students are encouraged to make many of their learning through active engagement and tasks. And again, that obviously suits the sort of work that you're doing. Coming to class and actually being involved in experiences that drive learning is really key to that. Okay, so pretty good. Some things we're doing really well, some things we could do with some work on. Hazel, can I hand over to you to talk to a little bit about Web 2? Try not to bash my head. And some options that are out there. Yeah, I'll swap places with you. Cheers. Yes. Before we put my designer's hat on, I just thought I'd give you a little bit of background, because why on earth would you listen to me? I'm working over in Te Puna with Tom and Diana and co. Previous to that, if I go way back, at university when I studied, it was all lined paper, a pen, and taking screes of notes, and often trying not to fall asleep. Computers were just for the IT guys, and luckily, the guy who actually turned out to now be my husband, was one of these geeks. He, with great amount of patience, took me step by step with getting to come to grips with computing and with technology. God, I hated it. The darn files would disappear. I'd type for hours and hours and not save like he told me to, and then the computer would crash. And God. Anyway, several years later, I actually worked in the Department of Language Studies for a couple of years, about 9 or 10 years ago. And an opportunity came up. By this time, I'm quite good on Word. An opportunity came up for computer-assisted language learning coordinator. And somebody said, "Oh, Hazel's good on computers. Yeah, we should get her in place." So I thought, oh, okay, I'll give it a go. And a learning curve like this. A couple of years after that, I then went to Dubai for 6 years. And I worked at Dubai Men's College. I've skipped heaps here. And I was given the opportunity to design a year-long blended learning course. In the meantime, I've done things like Masters in Applied Linguistics and so on and so forth, so lots of theory in the background here. And lots of just trying things out. Some things worked, some things didn't, but just trying things out. The students that were at Dubai Men's College, some hadn't seen a laptop before. They certainly didn't know how to use a keyboard. They didn't even have the vocabulary for things like keyboard, mouse, click, double click. So we had, but other guys were able to program. So we had the whole spectrum. So we had to have a blended learning course. We were using WebCT there. And it had to have enough scaffolding in place to help the students who didn't have the ICT skills to keep up with the guys who were really au fait with the whole kit and caboodle. We also had the problem that a lot of these students were coming from high school where memorization and rote learning were the norm. So students didn't have anything like critical thinking skills or self-directed learning skills. So again, within this blended learning course, we had to build in a whole lot of activities that were quite sort of, we started off of this sort of level and then moved into this level. We had to gradually ease them into things like
critical thinking, and design activities that would help them do this. Cut a really long story short, it was run over 3 years. It's now been taken on system-wide over the 16 colleges, which is kind of cool. And more exciting for us at the time was the results, what actually happened, because we did a big research study around it. We found that retention improved. We had a lot more students, especially the mature students. I remember, for example, one guy halfway through the semester had to go to India to do some business. Usually, he would have to withdraw from the course because he was away for a couple of months and then have to start again the following year. He didn't have to because we set this blended learning course up. We also had things like virtual office hours through MSN, so he could always keep in contact with us. So retention improved quite significantly. And the other interesting thing was we had a similar sort of fail rate, but the amount of A's and B grades improved, again, quite significantly. So the guys who were going to do well actually did better. They were able to it was quite empowering for them, which also freed us up to help the guys who weren't doing so well. So that sort of in a nutshell is blended learning and how it can work. Obviously it has to be tweaked to whatever circumstance you're in. Right, I'm gonna take that hat off and put my designer's hat on. Yep, go for it.
Sorry, could you just tell me what is WebCT?
WebCT, Blackboard.
Well,
Yeah.
It's a competitor.
Yeah, same. Moodle, Blackboard, WebCT, all the same. So just a learning management system. The other interesting thing in Dubai was the government used to block a whole heap of the sites. So we could use like PB Wiki wasn't blocked. So we had to be very careful with the Web 2 that we chose. The students might be happily using it day after day after day, and then they all come in one day and they'd be this site has been blocked. And that was it. We couldn't continue to use it. Okay. That's sort of an exciting challenge.
What's Web 2?
That is a fantastic question because I keep forgetting to... Okay, Web 2. Web 2, you'll hear people talk about Web 2 and they're referring to tools. They're talking about wikis and blogs. And anyone here got a Facebook account? Yay, okay, so we have some Web 2 users. However, it's more about the ethos of Web 2. So through these tools, blogs and wikis and so on, what the users of the Web 2 tools are doing is creating their own content. So in Facebook, you upload your pictures, you might put in some comments, you then might go to other people's Facebook accounts and leave comments for them. Or you might be following a blog. You read it, you put a comment in there, and you've changed the content and maybe started a dialogue. So Web 2 is all about people coming together in sort of virtual cyberspace and creating knowledge. So it's a co-creation of knowledge. And there's some really interesting, sometimes it's rubbish, sometimes it really is. But quite often there are some quite energetic discussions that go on. They're quite rigorous and people just about remain polite most of the time. But you can see how somebody puts a semi-formed theory out there and other people come along and add to it or say, have you thought of this? Or, oh, I'm not sure I agree with that aspect. So that's kind of Web 2 and the ethos of Web 2. Web 1, just as a comparison, Web 1 was more, you went to your travel agent's site and you could, maybe the amount of interactivity you could do was maybe look at some photographs and make a booking. You couldn't change the content on the page, you couldn't add to that content, you couldn't make comments, and a webmaster would look after what was actually on the site. So it's all kind of a one-way flow. Web 2 is kind of like this chaotic flow, all different directions. Does that answer your question? Cool, fantastic. Any other questions before I get into the next bit? Super. What I thought I would do is, now, so everybody's talking about this wonderful thing, blended learning. Great, super, where do you actually start? So what I've been doing over the last sort of year and a half is looking at the theory, looking at what I've learned and the different practices around, and trying to pull it all together into what I call the ICT Enhanced Learning and Teaching Framework and Model. And out of that's come this mind map. Now this mind map is sort of your, it gives you all of the aspects that you might include in a course and or an activity, including the Web 2 focus. So what I'd like to do this morning very quickly is just show you the mind map and show you how that translates into actuality. So sort of do a compare and contrast. So, if we just look at this as a whole, if you've got supervision, you'll see here in the course design you've got a welcome area, you've got an administration area, so that'll be your learning outcomes, your rubrics, guidelines, when are the exams, these types of things. So it's your nuts and bolts. You've also got a communication area. This might be integrated, so this might not be a standalone area, but you could have it as a standalone area. In here you've got things like your discussion board, you might have your virtual office hours. You might also, if we've got an agreement with people to host software up there that students can download, you might have that in there. You might also have the how-to videos, so guys who've not used MSN before can watch the how-to video, work out where to find it, how to download it, and then how to use it. So you kind of put the scaffolding and help in the logical area to what it relates to. You could also set up sort of an informal area, like a coffee room for your students. You can even set this, I've done courses in the past as a participant, where the facilitator has set it as a private area, so we can kind of go, oh, I don't like this very much, and sort of share quite personal thoughts and comments, but you know that the facilitator isn't actually going to be privy to these, which is kind of cool. You've also built in your modules, your content areas. Now when I expand this a little bit more, you'll see there's like hundreds of tools. What this is supposed to sort of be is all of the different options you could choose from. You don't have to have all of these in every single activity. So it's just sort of like a selection, a pick and mix, or I'll have a pink one and a red one and an orange one. You don't have to have sort of the whole 9 yards. And evaluation. This could be something that's ongoing, part of pretty much every session, but it also could be the sort of the needs analysis at the beginning and then the feedback mid-semester, the end of the semester. So it's sort of what you make it, and it can be evaluation of the course and or the content, whatever you want it to be. Right. Any questions so far? Superb.
Well, I've got a comment though.
Yes.
See, you use that technology and we couldn't actually see it.
Yeah.
You know, and you were still talking to it and yet we couldn't see it.
Yep. No, I absolutely, yeah. Which is a problem, which is why I've now expanded it. But I wanted to kind of give an idea of the whole overview of what was there. You will also have access to this through the Moodle site that Diana set up, so you can go and have a good look later. But a really good comment, absolutely.
It is actually an example where if we all did have our laptops that you could in fact see the whole thing right in front of you. So when there's things that are massive that you want to see from a large point of view like that, you can actually see it right in front of you as well as up on the screen.
Yeah.
Well, take that to the next extreme, James. We may as well be at home looking on our laptops, and you know, I could be in my office talking to everybody. You know.
That's the way you wanted to run your class, you could.
Yeah.
That's how
I just want
business
to ask,
learning works, but
your-
not in the business of business learning.
Did you have your Dubai students in front of you?
Some of the time. Especially, and what we found was at the beginning of the course, we had a lot of face-to-face time just to kind of help them and also illustrate how we were hoping they might interact with the course and also with each other through the course. So there was quite a lot of face-to-face time initially, but it got less and less as the weeks went on, and they became much more self-directed and confident. And absolutely, you could kind of run webinars and virtual tutorials, so that the online focus, especially for students who are working and they really just can't get in. So having it there in front of you, and you could be sat in your office running this.
I think it was last week we had Pacifica, Maori, excuse me, speakers, and they were talking about the value of, I guess, for those people who were hesitant learners, or whatever the word is, and perhaps not very proficient or comfortable with this, far more happy to interact directly, related to a person, to a real face, not a voice on the phone or a whatever. And how do you again, our students are a mix, as you've had. How can you make those people still feel at home or comfortable, whatever, get the best out of when you're using this kind of thing?
Absolutely. Really good point as well. A couple of things. Again, with the Emirati students, a very oral culture. There's a great enjoyment of sort of chewing the fat, sitting around, and that face-to-face contact is, and the building of relationships is really important, especially initially. We used a lot of video and multimedia to sort of personalise the course. So when you do a welcome, for example, you don't kind of just say, okay, this is me, and you put it in text. For a start, you've got students who may be challenged by written text. So having the multimedia opens it up, it makes it much more personal. You have a face, you have a voice. And if you can, if it's not a purely distance course, having that blended, the face-to-face sessions at the beginning. They're also doing some studies in Australia with Aboriginal folk. And they have found that, especially with the multimedia, the ability to express yourself through music, through visuals, through images, through videos, has been incredibly successful. And often they don't have very frequent access to the technology. They might have a mobile phone, or they have to go to the library. But the uptake, they've kind of got a whole site with a load of training there. The uptake has been incredible, and the feedback very, very positive in that it is a way of communicating with the rest of their community that otherwise they may not have that opportunity. So it's kind of, yes, absolutely, you have to have that face-to-face and the personalisation. And one of the first things that you might want to do in a blended course is get everybody to introduce themselves. And this could be their preference. It could be a video, it could be an audio recording, it could be some pictures of their favourite things plus an audio. So it's building in that flexibility, that choice, what best suits your preferred way of communicating. And not always written text.
Hazel,
yes.
What you're doing right now is interacting as a human being with Carol.
Yes.
And I've seen people use PowerPoints and lose the ability to actually teach because everything's on the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And they can't actually teach from the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And the students are just, next PowerPoint, and the lecturer is basically just reading it and can't teach it.
Yeah.
If the PowerPoint went off, that lecturer would have to leave the room if they couldn't actually give the lecture without reading from something.
Absolutely.
And so there, I'm not against technology, but I think sometimes there's a push to the extreme, and people actually forget to do what you've just been doing, which is actually explaining something as a human being from your head, vocally, to somebody else. Yeah. That's intelligence. This is not intelligence. This is technology. And there's a difference.
Totally agree with you. And which is why I've not talked really about any tools at the moment. Kind of almost forget the tools. All they do is give you, you've got a toolbox, one of which is the thing inside your head. The other tools are maybe the whiteboard, the projector, your whiteboard pen, and all of the Web 2 tools, Blackboard and or Moodle. These are all just tools. And as you say, without sort of the careful design of your course and a really good facilitator, They just remain tools. There's no learning going on.
Which I suppose is
Absolutely.
why this topic today is blended learning.
Yeah, yeah.
You can mix what suits your course and your style.
Absolutely, absolutely. And which is why this mind map, it's kind of, you just select what you feel is most appropriate for you and your students, and it might change over time as well. So there's a lot of flexibility kind of built into what could look quite static. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Great. Well, not completely off the topic question, but you mentioned MSN a few times, and that made me wonder whether Moodle has instant messaging built into it. Because Blackboard has one which is quite good because it can do algebra and symbols and things that are handy that you can't do in MSN. Does Moodle have, which
Wow, that's
maybe take it with Moodle, should we?
Haven't looked into that.
yeah. It's definitely got the instant messaging, and but whether it has the ability to recognise and those extra characters, I don't know. I'd have to find out for you. Anything else? Cool. How are we doing for time? Good. Cool. So, the welcome area, I've sort of already mentioned. You make it welcoming. It's kind of like, especially students who maybe can't make it for the first week of semester, or you make it so that you are the person, you have a voice, but also the other people on the course have a voice. So if we go and have a look at a course, I think Vicar was using this with you guys the other day. Yeah. Okay.
Errol's ego.
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, it's cool. So, the welcome area. This is actually the framework for a one-off or series of workshops. So you can see through showing you this, it's kind of like the flexibility. You can either have it for a whole course, one activity, or sort of a one-off. Now, up here, participants. If we click on participants, you get a list of everybody who's in here, and in here you put your profile. So I've put a bit of text, I've put a really awful video that I'm very embarrassed about, and some links to some other places that people might want to go visit if they have any interest. So you can encourage your students to put that sort of presence in the course. It's also kind of helpful when you've got your hundreds of students, and just trying to get to know all of your students and their names and their requirements and their preferences. It's quite nice to be able to pop into the profiles and just see who is in your group.
That way the Moodle set up that profile carries across multiple courses.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
only have to do it once, and we don't all have to ask them if we can.
Yes. Yeah, which is kind of neat. So you don't have to keep creating your profile again and
So
again.
you're saying if a student sets up their profile for course A,
Yeah.
it will be every other course they're enrolled in, you pick that profile up.
Correct.
And take it across.
Yeah.
So you could do an orientation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Which would be quite a good point to kind of just introduce them to the whole platform as well, and giving them something meaningful to do in the tools. Like,
Ones with blank pages and no photo available, their little picture slide tells you something about them straight away.
yeah.
So that could be something that was offered to us rather than the photos that we get printed out with the names and nationalities.
Absolutely, yeah. And it would be much more personalised, so you actually get a real sense of who the person is. I mean, if there's not much there, you realise they're quite a private person, so yeah. Also, if we go back to the mind map, the communication and sharing. So this is all your announcements, frequently asked questions. You know those questions that you get 200 times in the first couple of weeks? You can put this into a discussion board and build up a bank of answers over time, which means that you don't have to keep answering those questions. But, and this is where it comes down to modelling in class. When somebody comes to ask you a question, if you know that the answer's in the discussion board, then as a group you can go and access the answer with the student until people are used to just going straight to the discussion board and checking first, and then working out the answers not there, and then contact you. So in here you've got upcoming events, you've got a calendar, you can also put announcements and so on and so forth, but because it's a one-off, it's quite a sparse communications area. Go back to the mindmap. The whole sort of admin course info guidelines, you can either, especially with rubrics and things like this, put it into the module area, which I'll show you in a second, and or have a separate area where it's like a one-stop shop. You know, in there you find all of the rules and regulations for the course, the learning outcomes, the exam timetable, and so on and so forth. So it's quite handy to have it all in one place.
Excuse me a second, are these links? So where it says timetables, if I go and click on timetables, I can go to my timetable or the timetable?
You could build it like that. At the moment they're not links, but in fact, yes, you could easily build it like that. Yeah, and very visual, much more visual.
So that's something we could be provided with something like that we were all using, and that provided us with a link, or that we could attach the links to.
So Hazel, is this a mind map that you have done, or is this something that you have found somewhere that is available for everybody, or is this just your version?
This is something I've done and sort of developed. It's probably in about its 10th different version now, but I'm sort of very happy to share it with everybody. So it's sort of part of my research and is out there. And I, in fact, it would be great if people used it.
Yes.
In fact, it will reappear shortly.
Yeah, I had a feeling you're going to do something. Yeah.
Okay. So if we pop back over here, down here we've got all of the administration for the faculty member and the course, but also here are all the learning outcomes and the overview for this particular session. So that's kind of all built in. If we go back to here, then mind map, we look over here, we've got evaluation. Even within this one-off course, we've got the evaluation task built in here. Go back to here, we'll go down to the modules. So you'll see the module, you've got, it could be a topic, it could be, I'm not quite sure how the courses are set up here, but it's up to you whether you kind of pull it out into topics or sub-themes. So it's very much your creative juices can guide how you put the course together. It's kind of up to you. However, within that, you then have sort of like your assignments and assessments. What are you trying to help the students achieve? What's the goals? And then within that, you've got the design, you've got face-to-face, or you could have something that's a discussion forum, or it could be where everybody's working in groups and they go off and they build a wiki together with a whole load of research involved in that, then come back and share that with the rest of the group. So there's heaps of different options there. And within that, you have scaffolding. So scaffolding could be how-to videos. That could be also concepts, not just click here, open this window. So those really nitty-gritty concepts that are quite tricky to understand, you could put into a video. You could illustrate with images and diagrams. And you wouldn't have to each of you do this. This could be a shared resource, and a student could come to a face-to-face session, be part of it, go away, and you know that at that moment where you kind of think, well, I'm sure I understood it, but crikey, I haven't got a clue now. But you could go to the video, play it, pause it, watch it again and again and again, get on the discussion board and say, has anybody got an idea what's going on here? So you're building within the course the concepts, the ideas, and the help some students will need to grasp some of the concepts that you're trying to get into. Different tools, it's just basically a list of tools. As we were saying earlier, it is, if you think of Blackboard or Moodle as your wheelbarrow, these are your rakes and your spades and your trowels. So it's kind of what works best for you, what you feel most comfortable with, and the sorts of interactions that you want. So if you want collaborative learning, probably a wiki's the way to go. If you want self-reflection, a blog is probably the thing to choose. But this design bit comes first. It's your activity, it's your thinking of what you want to achieve, your learning outcomes, and then you think, okay, so I'd like them to work in groups and I'd like them to come up with this. Then you go to this and think, oh, okay, so that tool's probably going to be best. Help, Hazel! So that's the way to do it. You get all your design done, and then and only then you think about the tools that you might want to use. If I go back to this. So in this course, we've got a video embedded here, which was part of the introduction. We have some activities. So this is kind of just the overview of the activity. And then it's actually a session where people work in pairs around a laptop, and it's kind of guided discovery. So these are some of the places they could look to help them answer or complete the activity. And these sort of translate into topic areas. So we've got wikis, blogs, virtual worlds, etc., etc. So if you translate that into bigger packages, if you like, which are the topics which make up your course, you can see how that mind map can be translated either into something quite small or into a much larger package. Any questions? Fantastic. My throat's giving way, so I'm going to...
You're not used to a 3-hour lecture.
You're not kidding me.
What was AICC? I could find SCORM for myself, but I didn't think that the All Indian Congress Committee was quite AICC.
Whereabouts was it, sorry?
It was on your flow chart. It was one of the compliancy standards.
Okay. It is literally just another set of standards. So it's if you build a package of different things that link together. SCORM is one way, so you can plug that straight into the back of Blackboard. Yeah. Exactly the same, but just different standards.
What does the acronym actually stand for?
Haven't got a clue.
that was the bit I figured it was standard. But
no idea.
The first 10 entries in Google are 10 different acronyms. I'm not sure. Something like concertos.
Cool. That actually sounds pretty. It's probably more interesting than what it actually does stand for.
One of the things I'm just wondering about etiquette in terms of where do you deal with what's appropriate in terms of going on these sites or on these interchanges. You know, we open this up to our students so they can interact as much as they choose, and if the interaction becomes inappropriate, okay.
But I would say you can put your guidelines up here. In that orientation week, that's when you have a big discussion around what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, links to what's a joke, when is that going to be acceptable. But I'd say that's probably something that you would continue to discuss and, if necessary, reinforce all the way along. You can actually set this up, certainly initially, when somebody makes a posting, for example, it has to come through you first. So you can have, if it's a controversial topic or you're a bit concerned, you can always set it up so that you have to say that post is okay before it appears on the discussion board. Okay. So there's sort of quite a lot of different ways of looking at it. But